Desire Demon. In all my studies, I must say that the most intriguing was the interview with the Desire Demon. That the creature was willing to speak with me was a sign that this was no mere monster, mindlessly driven by its nature, but rather a rational being, as interested in me as I was in it. It took a form that I would call female, though I had no doubt that it could appear otherwise. I wondered if it appeared as it did because I wanted it, or because I expected it to. She, and indeed I could only think of her as such now, smiled warmly at me and laughed a musical sound that seemed to thrill my old heart. So frightened was I of this creature's legendary abilities to twist the hearts of men, and so relieved was I when I looked across the table into her dark eyes. It was a fearsome creature of the fade, but as I spoke with her, I slowly came to realize that this demon was merely misunderstood as we mages are ourselves. From the journal of former senior enchanter Malleus, once of the Circle of Ravane, declared apostate in 920. Of all the threats from beyond the veil, few are more insidious and deceptively deadly than the Desire Demon. In folklore, such demons are characterized as peddlers of lust, luring their prey into sexual encounter only to be slain at the culmination. While a Desire Demon can indeed deal in pleasure, in truth they deal with any manner of desire that humans can possess, wealth, power, and beauty, to name a few. Far more intelligent than the bestial hunger and rage demons, and more ambitious than the demons of sloth, these dark spirits are amongst the most skilled of tempting mages into possession. Many who serve the whims of a Desire Demon never realize it. They are manipulated by illusions and deceit, if not outright mind control, although these demons are reluctant to resort to such crude measures. Instead, they seem to take great pleasure in corruption. The greater the deceit, the greater their victory. Only demons of pride prove more fearsome opponents when roused. Their abilities to affect the mind allow them to assume disguises and even alter the environment to their purposes, not to mention the great strength and speed they possess if they should have to resort to more physical means. Most often a Desire Demon will attempt to bargain its way to freedom if overpowered. Many stories exist that depict mages defeating Desire Demons to the point where a wish can be wrested from them. It should be noted that in such stories the demon almost always gets the upper hand, even when the mage thinks his wish has been granted. Rage Demon. Encountered in the Fade, the true form of a Rage Demon is a frightening sight. A thing of pure fire, its body seemingly made of amorphous lava, and its eyes two pinpricks of baleful light radiating from its core. The abilities of such a demon center on the fire it generates. It burns those who come near, and the most powerful of its kind are able to lash out with bolts of fire and even firestorms that can affect entire areas. Fortunately, even powerful rage demons are less intelligent than most other varieties. The tactics are simple. Attack an enemy on sight with as much force as possible until it perishes. Some rage demons carry over their heat-based ability into possessed hosts, but otherwise the true form is mostly seen outside of the Fade when it's specifically summoned by a mage to do its bidding. Apostates. I have read that. I'm pretty sure. Lyrium. More than half of the wealth of Orzamer comes from a single, extremely rare substance, Lyrium. The Chantry believes it to be the waters of the Fade, mentioned in the Canticle of the Threnodius, the very stuff of creation itself, from whence the Maker fashioned the world. Only a handful of mining caste families hazard extracting the ore, finding veins in the stone quite literally by ear. For in its raw form, Lyrium sings, and the discerning can hear the sound even through solid rock. Even though dwarves have a natural resistance, raw lyrium is dangerous for all but the most experienced of the mining castes to handle. Even for dwarves, exposure to the unprocessed mineral can cause deafness or memory loss. For humans and elves, direct contact with lyrium produces nausea, blistering of the skin, and dementia. Mages cannot even approach an unprocessed lyrium. Doing so is invariably fatal. Despite its dangers, lyrium is the single most valuable mineral currently known, and that the Winter Imperium it has been known to command a higher price than diamond. The dwarves sell very little of the processed mineral to the surface, given the greater portion of what they mine to their own smiths, who use it in the forging of all truly superior dwarven weapons and armor. What processed lyrium is sold on the surface goes only into the Chantry, who strictly control the supply. From the Chantry it is dispensed both to the Templars, who make use of it in tracking and fighting Maleficarum, and to the Circle. In the hands of the Circle, Lyrium reaches its fullest potential. Therefore, Maori craftsmen transform it into an array of useful items from the practical, such as magically hardened stone for construction, to the legendary silver armor of King Calanhad. When mixed into liquid and ingested, Lyrium allows mages to enter the Fade fully aware, unlike all others who reach it only while dreaming. Such potions can also be used to aid in the casting of especially taxing spells, for a short time granting a mage far greater power than he normally wields. Lyrium has its cost, however. Prolonged use becomes addictive, the cravings unbearable. Over time, Templars grow disoriented, incapable of distinguishing memory from present, or dream from waking. They frequently become paranoid, as the worst memories and nightmares haunt their waking hours. Mages have additionally been known to suffer physical mutation. The Magister Lords of the Tevinter Imperium were widely reputed to have been so affected by the years of lyrium use that they could not be recognized by their own kin, not even as creatures that had once been human. From In Pursuit of Knowledge, Travels of a Chantry Scholar by Brother Jenny TV. History of Ferelden, Chapter 1. Ferelden, as we think of it now, did not exist before the Exalted Age. Instead, the valley was divided up into dozens of the old Amari clans. They warred constantly with one another over land, honored the allegiance of the freeholders, and, on one notable occasion, the name given to a favourite Mabari. And then, in the 33rd year of the Exalted Age, Calanhad therein became Tan of Denerim, and everything changed. Most of what we know about the founding of our nation comes from old songs that the bards passed down through the ages. The songs are filled with wild exaggerations and outright lies, but this hardly differs from the scholarly papers of some of my contemporaries. There is no agreement among poets or scholars in how they did it, but Calanhad gained the support of the Circle of Magi, and they crafted for him a suit of silvery white armor that, by all accounts, repelled both arrow and blade. Calanhad led his army across the valley and to capture Redcliffe, one of only 3 men who ever successfully laid siege to that fortress, and presented himself to the bands of the landsmeet as their king. The poets tell us that every lord knelt before Calanhad without question. The fact that he attended the landsmeet surrounded by ash warriors and loyal mages of the Circle is generally omitted from the ballads, however. From Calanhad came the line of the Therian kings and queens who reigned, uninterrupted, until the 44th year of the Blessed Age, when the Orlesian invasion came. The rightful king was forced to flee Denerim, and for 70 years a puppet sat on the throne. From Ferelden Folklore and History by Sister Petrine, Chantry Scholar. Geography of Ferelden. The kingdom of Ferelden is the southernmost civilized nation in Thedas, although some scholars dispute that claim to civilization. It is perhaps the most physically isolated of all the kingdoms of Thedas. To the east is the Amaranthine Ocean, to the north the Waking Sea, and to the south the Kokari Wilds, which in the summer months are a vast peat bog, and in the winter become a treacherous labyrinth of iced over waterways. The Frostback Mountains guard the western border, and only a narrow path between the mountains and the sea allows travel between Ferelden and Dolay. Most of the land in the central portion of the kingdom, called the Banon, is open plains. These are crossed by the remnants of an ancient winter highway that once connected Val Royeaux with Ostagar on the edge of the Kokari Wilds. The western part of Ferelden is dominated by Lake Calanhad, a huge caldera filled by the runoff from glaciers from nearby mountains. Lake Calanhad is home to the famed fortress of Redcliffe, as well as the Circle Tower, which houses Ferelden's Circle of Magi. In the east is the vast Brazilian forest, which the superstitious locals profess to be haunted, and from which rises the Dragon's Peak, a solitary mountain that guards the capital city of Denerim. From In Pursuit of Knowledge, Travels of a Chantry Scholar by Brother Jenny TV. The Elysian Empire. There are many lords and ladies in Val Royeaux, and I mean this literally. Once the system of noble titles in Nolay was labyrinthine. There were barons and baroness and baronets and sir barons and a horde of others, each with its own origins and its own nuances of comparison. The Orlesian aristocracy is ancient and much given to competition. All the nobility play the grand game, as it is known, whether they wish to or not. It is a game of reputation and patronage, where moves are made with rumours and scandal is the chief weapon. No gentle game this. More blood has been drawn as a result of the grand game than any war the Elysians ever fought. Of this I am assured by almost every gentleman here. As far as titles went, everything changed with the coming of Emperor Draken, who established the Elysian Empire as it exists now, and who created the Chantry. There is no more venerated figure in Orlais. In Varoyo, the statue of Draken stands as tall as the statue of Andraste. Draken determined that the Grand Game was tearing Orlais apart, so he abolished all titles besides his own, and Lord and Lady. I am told with some twittering amusement that this action did not end the Grand Game as Draken had intended. Now the lords and ladies collected unofficial titles rather than official ones, such as the Exalted Patron of Tassa's Clay, or Uncle to the Champion of Tremor. It is a headache to remember such titles, and one winces to think of the poor doorman at balls who must rattle them off as each guest enters the room. The aristocracy is different from Ferelden in other ways as well. The Orlesians' right to rule stems directly from the Maker. There exists neither the concept of rule by merit nor the slightest notion of rebellion. If one is not noble, one aspires to be, or at least aspires to be in the good graces of a noble, and is ever watching for a way to enter the patronage of those better placed in the Grand Game. And then there are the masks, and the cosmetics. I have not seen so much paint since the kennels at However, but that is another story. From Beyond the Frostbacks by Ban Teoric of West Hill, 920 Dragon. Nothing new about Alistair, Connor Guerrin. With 8 from the circle, he was freed from the demon's power. Connor will be sent to the circle tower, where he will no longer pose a danger to the innocent. 8 from the circle? What circle? Come on, really. Arl Rendon Howe. It appears it will be civil war after all, despite the Darkspawn. Pity. The Arling of Amaranthine winds along the sinuous northeastern coast of Ferelden. The waking sea is known for its temper, and the storms that sweep in from the warmer northern waters are sudden and brutal. These are the lands of Rendon Howe. He was born during the occupation, and like many of the nobles at the time, joined Prince Merrick's rebels. He fought alongside young Bryce Cousland, future Tan of However, and Leonis Bryland, future Earl of Southreach, at the bloody Battle of White River. It was the most catastrophic defeat of the entire occupation, from which only 50 rebel soldiers escaped alive. Although he was decorated for valor by King Merrick, Howe's abrasive manners have earned him almost universal dislike amongst his peers. Arlessa Isolde. We've read her out. But we have this, the Circle of Major, and it's not true. The Circle of Major were finally called in almost too late, and Connor was freed from the demon's power though the damage to Radcliffe was severe. It doesn't even say that she is dead, for crying out loud. It seems to be a bug too. Loghain Mac Tir. Hang on, let me take a note. Right. Loghain Mac Tir. His actions sparked civil war. Loghain's supporters found themselves fighting their neighbors who blamed Loghain for the death of the king, as well as those who simply wished to take advantage of the power vacuum. This is probably the only new line we have. Zevran Arainai. I said him wrong. Everyone else says him wrong. He's the only one who pronounces his own name right, it seems. He calls himself Zevran, which is of course correct. The crow. I will not try to do that. I did it before in the dialogue. I'm still stunned that I managed. The crows send their regards. Between the Tevinter Imperium, Rivain, and the Free Marches sits the nation of Antiva. Although it possesses few resources of its own, Antiva's location makes it a center for trade in the north, and the capital, Antiva City, is the wealthiest in the world. Antiva has virtually no army. The monarchy is too weak to support one. Most Antivans... I should stop scrolling when I'm talking, because I always lose my mind. Most Antivans would be hard-pressed even to name the current king, as the true power lies in the hands of a dozen merchant princes, each with a personal army, and each locked in a constant struggle for power against all the others. Anyone would think then that Antiva would be a ripe target for invasion by one of the neighbors, but even the Qunari leave Antiva alone for one very good reason: the House of Crows. The most efficient, most feared, and most expensive guild of assassins in the world calls Antiva their home, and their reputation alone defends the borders. Zevran was the crow contracted by Loghain to assassinate Alistair and Sigyn. One failed attempt later, however, he found himself at the mercy of his would-be victims. They showed him unexpected mercy, and in return he swore to aid the Wardens on their quest to end the Blight. Books and Songs, The First Blight, Chapter 2. People today have little concept of the consequences of the second sin. Oh, believe me when I say that when asked, pious chant-regarding folk will cast the use of foul magic, spitting and snapping their fingers, but none live today who actually remember the horror that was unleashed so very long ago. Whatever records might have existed regrettably did not survive the chaos and ignorance that was to follow. We have only the tales of survivors handed down through the murky ages and the dogma of the chantry to instruct us, and that is precious little indeed. I believe I am not understating when I say that the second sin unleashed the bane of all life upon Thedas. The Darkspawn are more virulent than the West Plague, a heartless force of nature that came into our world like an ill wind. We know from accounts of later blights, as these Darkspawn invasions come to be called, never has a more appropriate name existed, that the Darkspawn spread disease and famine wherever they tread. The earth itself is corrupted by the presence, the sky roiling with angry black clouds. I do not exaggerate, my friends, when I say that the mass gathering of Darkspawn is an omen of dread cataclysm. It is said that those cursed magisters who became the first Darkspawn scratched at the very earth to find solace in the darkness of the dwarven deep roads, and there in the shadows they multiplied, whether by intelligent design or some last vestige of worship in their minds. They attempted to locate the old gods they once served. They found what they sought. Diarmuid, first among the old gods, once known as the Dragon of Silence before the Maker imprisoned him and all his brethren beneath the earth for the first sin, usurping the Maker's place in mankind's heart. The slumbering dragon awoke freed from the Maker's prison by his twisted followers and became corrupted himself. Diarmuid was transformed into the first archdemon, his great and terrible power given will by a rotting, unholy mind. With the Darkspawn horde following, Diarmuid rose and took wing in the skies once again, bringing ruin to the world as the world the Maker had created. The old god had become the eye of a dark storm that would ravage the entire world. From Tales of the Destruction of Thedas by Brother Jenny TV, Chantry Scholar. Journal of the Tranquil. Some laugh at me, I no longer mind. Once upon a time I studied as they did. I learned under the tutelage of an enchanter and attempted to master the art of bending magic to my will, and while I did well enough, I know that I struggled. I saw the way of the enchanter looked at me, the sidelong glances of worry and disappointment. While other apprentices were conjuring fire, I could barely light a candle. I was frightened of magic. When I was a boy, my grandmother regaled me with tales of the terrible Flemeth, the Witch of the Wilds. She told me the magisters, and how their evil magic infected the world with the Darkspawn. She told me of demons, and how they were drawn to the dreams of those who possessed magic, like moths to a flame. She told me all these things because, she said, the talent ran in our family's blood. And so it ran in mine. All my young life I had dreaded the thought, prayed to the Maker that I was not so cursed, but I knew otherwise. Deep in my heart I knew. When the Templars came to our home, I knew. The Mage's Tower was terrifying, full of secrets and danger. The Templars glared at me as if I could spring and fall into an abomination before their very eyes. My enchanter patiently attempted to teach me to marshal my willpower, my only defense should a demon attempt to enslave me, but it was no use. How many nights did I cry myself to sleep in that dark and lonely place? Then my heroine came at last, my final test. Face a demon, they said, or submit to the rite of tranquility. They would sever my connection to the Faith, and thus I would never dream, and no demon could ever touch me. But I would also be unable to do magic, and I would never feel an emotion ever again. Facing the demon was certain death, so my choice was easy. It was not so painful. Now I serve in other ways. We Tranquil manage the archives, we run the tower, purchase the supplies, and maintain the accounts. Our condition also allows us to use the magical element Lyrium without ill effect, and thus we are the ones who enchant the magical items. We are the merchants who sell these items to those the circle permits, and the coin from those sales provides the circle's wealth. Thus we Tranquil are vital. The young and old may stare at me ill at ease, but they would be worse off without me. They may think me a failure, but there is no horror for me now. I feel no fear of what I am. The shadows are merely shadows, and I am content. Edin the meek, Tranquil of the Chantry of Magi of Starkhaven, the Free Marges. Quest related. Which? Friends of the Red Journey. The task was never promised to be easy. You said you could enter the Circle Tower, and you were believed. Find the small painted box in the first Enchanter Irving's office, and deliver it to the door marked on Denerim as agreed, or be prepared to find yourself hunted across Ferelden. Friends of the journey. There is a sketched map of several doors. It requires the box to be placed on the block out false leads.